All right, guys. So, Psycho 3 from 1986. Now, with the first Psycho, probably for me, along with Mario Bava's Black Sunday, which both came out in 1960, are probably the most influential horror films of all time. Now, to go from Psycho in 1960 and over 22, 23 years later, to come out with a sequel to Psycho, which no one wanted to touch, no one wanted to attempt that. And we ended up getting, in my opinion, one of the greatest sequels ever made. Like, Psycho 2 is absolutely phenomenal. I'd argue that Anthony Perkins' performance in Psycho 2 is better than in Psycho. Like, his performance in Psycho 2 is absolutely phenomenal. And the whole story of Psycho 2, it feels so organic. It feels like it belongs in the Psycho universe. It feels like this is naturally how Norman's life would turn out after the events of the first movie, which is what makes it such a great sequel. Like, it all fits in, it all makes sense, and expands upon everything in the original. Now, a few years later, we get Psycho 3. And this is Anthony Perkins directing his directorial debut, which I don't think has any negatives. Like, he actually directs himself very well throughout this film, and it is very well directed. This is a above average third entry in this franchise. It's not great. There are some things throughout it that I just feel are unnecessary or just don't feel like Psycho, like the entirety of Psycho 2 did. But there's some good stuff in here. I mean, for people who haven't seen Psycho 3 or Psycho 2, I'll give a little recap. So in Psycho 2, we have Norman being released from the mental institution that he was in after committing the murders in the first Psycho. And after 22, 23 years, he's deemed cured. And he is allowed to leave, come back to the Bates Motel. And that's another thing with Psycho 2 is that in Psycho, the original, after Marion dies in the shower, the whole first part of the movie, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you're centered around Marion Crane. Then once she's murdered by Mother, as the first time you see that movie, no one sees that twist coming. So, I forgot what I was going to say. And I'm not editing this shit. I've been editing enough today. But everything shifts from Marion, and our focus is shifted to revolving around Norman for the rest of the movie. And then when we find out, the twist at the end, and that it's his mother's dead corpse, and that it has split personality. In Psycho 2, we really start to feel bad for Norman. Like, we really feel for Norman in Psycho 2. He's released from this mental institution, he goes back to the Bates Motel, and he's cured, again, quote unquote cured, but he seems to have processed everything that he's done. And he's living with it. And he paid his debt to society. And throughout Psycho 2, he's just trying to live a normal life. He's trying to put all his crazy past behind him and try to be a regular member of society. And then, of course, we have his real mother that's killing people left and right for screwing Norman over and always messing with him. And then we have Vera Miles playing Lila Crane back in Psycho 2, and Meg Tilly, her daughter, that are messing with him the entire time. So all of Psycho 2 you feel for Norman Bates, which you don't really feel the same way in the first movie. So that's another thing that's just excellent about the sequel. In this movie, I mean, at the end of Psycho 2, we have Mrs. Spool, the real mother of Norman, which don't we find out that she's not really his mother and she lied? It's been a while since I've seen Psycho 3 and 4, but pretty sure we find out that she lied and wasn't really her real mother, his real mother. I'm not sure. But this movie is a decent continuation to Psycho 2. It's just not on the level that Psycho 2 is. And it never will be. So let's dive into and talk Psycho 3, 1986. Anthony Perkins. What more can you say about him? Just a phenomenal performance in this movie, just as close to Psycho 2 and Psycho the original. So yeah, at the end of Psycho 2, Norman is back to crazy Norman. He kills Mrs. Spool, his supposed mother, and he's just back to full on Norman, carrying his mother's corpse and talking with her. So now we have full on psychotic Norman again at the start of this movie, which is, I think, I mean, this, I can't think of anywhere else they could have went with this movie. I mean, they already did everything in the original, which you can never top. They did an excellent decision with the whole story and making you feel bad for Norman and everything, and him not really being the killer in all of Psycho 2. So it makes sense that they can't do that again. They can't make you feeling for Norman like he's not a fucking mental psychotic killer. He's a psycho. So this movie has an opening where there is a nun who is afraid of her vows, of taking her vows, and she wants to kill herself. And she's at the top of the nunnery, for lack of a better word, and she's ready to jump off. And like the head sister nun, she's trying to stop her, and when she like reaches back, she knocks the nun off. Like, this is like 3, 4, 5 stories up. This bitch flies all the way down the stairwell, dead. So now this woman is beside herself. She feels like a murderer. She was just going to kill herself, so she's not having the best day. And then she ends up meeting this guy who is a drifter, basically, who is trying to make his way to LA in California and become a rock star. Dwayne, I think his name is, if I recall correctly. And he ends up taking up space taking up space. He does take up space. He's taken up residence in the Bates Motel, and he ends up getting a part-time job there just to save up some money and to have a place to live until he can, get to LA and become this big rock star, which I think he plays guitar in this. He's alright. Now, what I do like about this third entry here is I like how the nun, I forget her name, I'll find out soon, I like how he's getting constant reminders of his past that slowly, I mean, he's already over the edge, but it's pushing him further over the edge in this movie. Like, if Psycho 2 was our feeling bad for Norman and his tried redemption in some way, this is his unraveling again. And just all the shit the sheriff in this movie, who I'm pretty sure he's the sheriff or something like that, he was in the original Psycho, and he was also in Psycho 2, and he's very, very adamant about giving Norman a second chance. Now, I'm all for giving people chances, multiple chances, if it's people I care about. But when it comes to Norman Bates, and this guy was the sheriff or the cop or whatever that was there when they arrested Norman, and he knows he's a psychotic killer, this guy tries a little too hard to, he's fine now, don't worry about it. Like, I don't know, something with him in this movie, it's stupid. Maureen is the nun's name, which, like I said, I like how they really start to fuck with Norman's mind here. That he is immediately reminded of Marion Crane upon meeting Maureen here. And on her suitcase, she even has the same initials. It's MC. So he sees that and immediately thinks of Marion. He sees her. This is another thing. Oh yeah, that Dwayne puts her in cabin 1 when he starts working there. It's the same cabin that Marion was in. So all these things are happening to Norman that, I mean, he doesn't want these things to happen, but it's just like the universe is against him in this movie. Now, another reason this doesn't come anywhere close to Psycho 2 for me is the characters. Like, we had Meg Tilly, who's Mary, phenomenal in that movie. And Anthony Perkins' performance, like I said, is just excellent. We have Mr. Toomey, like characters I really like. We have Lila Crane back. Maureen, I don't really care for. I mean, she's fine, but she's not a great character or anything. And Dwayne, the rock star wannabe, he's just okay too. And those are basically the only characters in this movie, aside from like a party they have at the Bates Motel later. But then Dwayne picks up Maureen. And like I said, he's drifting, he's going across country trying to get to LA. And it's pouring rain, and he picks up Maureen. And he basically tries to rape her. Like, he really, like, does. And she's saying, like, please don't do that and everything. And then he just throws her ass out of the car in the pouring rain. This guy's a fucking asshole. And then when she shows up at the Bates Motel later, after we have a nice little diner scene back in the same diner from Psycho 2, and they have a missing posters, missing poster, fuck you, missing persons poster of Mrs. Spool, his mother, who worked at the diner in the last movie. So there's a lot of nice little nods to the original and to Psycho 2 here. So, I mean, this is a trilogy. It's an excellent trilogy, despite this one being a bit lackluster. Psycho 4, I mean, we'll talk about that one. But let me tell you, for a directorial debut from Anthony Perkins, like I said, the directing's phenomenal here. Like, throughout this whole movie. The cinematography is great. It looks just like Psycho 2. It really feels like a continuation of that. The Bates Motel looks phenomenal. The house, like, all of that looks excellent and really helps you feel like you're still in the Psycho universe watching this. I actually really like this scene when Norman's in his parlor in the back of the office in the hotel, and he's stuffing his birds and everything. Then he sees the bag, the plastic brown bag, start to move on its own. And this is the first thing here that he starts to question his sanity and everything. Then it's just the bird was alive. I mean, this guy don't know how to kill birds. Or I don't know. But the bird's alive. And he ends up flying out of the bag, and then he feels relieved. He's like, all right, like, I'm not losing my mind. Same scene when he's still sewing up the bird, but then he hallucinates like that it's a severed hand that he's sewing up. Great stuff too. Like, all of this that really, like, terrifies Norman, that he's slipping back into insanity. And that's handled very well in this movie. Also, when it comes to Perkins directing this, like, you have to take into consideration that directing a film is a huge undertaking on its own. But directing yourself in a leading role is exceptionally difficult. And like I said, he pulls it off amazing here. His performance is amazing, and all his camera work, directing, all of that's fantastic here. So kudos, Anthony Perkins. I love how Norman gives Dwayne when he's offering him I don't know what that was. Offering him the job. He gives him the candy corns, which the whole candy corn eating thing of Norman Bates was all improvised by Anthony Perkins, which is another phenomenal thing. So then we have this reporter, who I do not remember her name. Tracy, I think. And she basically harasses Norman throughout this whole movie. Like, she says that she just wants to talk to him, and that she's doing, like, I don't know, research and stuff on serial killers, and how even though that they're rehabilitated, that people still have, hateful feelings towards them. And fucking course. People are going to be mad at someone who murders a bunch of innocent people. And speaking the reporter, she's a bitch too. So, I mean, I really don't care for the characters here. That's like a big negative of this film. I love when the reporter is sitting down with Norman at the diner, and twice she says, like, Norman, you've been locked up 20 years, and he has to correct her both times and says 22. That's great. And I love how it's like a main theme through this whole series here that, like Norman says in the original, we all go a little mad sometimes. But it's a terrifying thought when some of those people go too mad and crazy that they can never fully get back to sanity. And we see that throughout this whole series, that Norman is struggling constantly with his sanity and is just lopping back and forth between being his mother and just a crazy person and trying like really, really hard to be sane and to not slip back into this and to start killing people again. It's great. Almost positive now that Perkins plays piano, because he plays piano a few times in Psycho 2. And I think I said in the video for that looks like he's actually playing. Same thing here, he's just playing. Definitely he knows how to play piano. Don't walk up to a Bates Motel and find the guy who tried to rape you the night before and proceed to stay. So, obviously I shouldn't really have to say this, but he's carrying around his mom's corpse again. We have the great creepy-ass voice the mother uses. Well, Norman uses as his mom. But this is Mrs. Spool that he killed at the end of the last movie. Obviously, it's not his original mother's bones, because they would have seized that shit when they arrested him 22 years ago. So he's carrying around Mrs. Spool now as his mother. And she looks creepy, man, like she does. Like the way they have her made up. The corpse looks great. Like I said, the voice is just creepy as hell. It's same as the other two movies. Awesome. Now, another negative here is that they retread on the whole same thing from the last movie of Meg Tilly, Mary, falling for him in a way and wanting to not cause him any harm, and goes against Lila's wishes, her mother, and won't do it anymore, won't cause him any more harm, won't fuck with Norman anymore. So there's like a bond between them that's formed. And they retreat on the same thing here with Maureen the nun and Norman. Like he ends up saving her life when she tries slashing her wrist, killing herself in the bathtub. And he has to come, and I love that he has to come back into that room, into cabin 1, and he has to open the door and be reminded of Marion's body dead in the shower that he was responsible for. But this time he sees Maureen attempted killing herself, and then he ends up saving her life and getting her help. So he doesn't have no conscience. He has a conscience. He has feelings. Like he does. And even Tracy, the reporter, says that to him, that you live with guilt every day, that you have a conscience. So just the way that they blur the lines between like how you feel about this character is excellent through all these movies. Now, here's another stupid thing. I mean, he comes in, Norman, into cabin 1 to kill Maureen. Full mother apparel and everything. Full wig, everything. He's mother. Now, we've seen and heard numerous times that once he becomes mother, he's fully mother. But yet he goes in to kill Maureen, and when he opens the shower curtain, she's bleeding out in the tub from slitting her wrists. And he just, like, he immediately snaps out of mother, and he comes back to Norman immediately and feels bad, and then calls the police or the ambulance. I don't know. None of that makes sense. I mean, he's supposed to be full-on mother when he's in mother mode. And he's able to just snap out of it from what? From just seeing some bitch in the tub, like dying. He's seen a lot of dying. He's been responsible for a lot of it. So I don't know. None of that makes sense. And then while she's in the tub, she says, "Forgive me." And while she's looking up at Norman dressed as his mother, she sees the Virgin Mary. And she thinks that this is some sort of sign. And then after Norman visiting her in the hospital, offers her to come stay back at the hotel in the same room that she just tried killing herself. And she accepts. So Dwayne, who's working at the motel, ends up bringing home some girl, fucking her, then just is a dick and kicks her out, like without her clothes on. Just kicks her out of there, and then, unfortunately, she becomes Norman's victim. Rather, Norman's mother's victim. Damn, man. This guy, Dwayne, like, decorated his entire hotel room with photos all over the wall and furniture and shit like that wasn't in the original room, like, in a matter of what, a day? Nice boobies from the girl, though. And the kills are decent in here, too. Like, there's some decent blood effects and stuff like that isn't over the top gore that would feel out of place in a Psycho film. So, all of that's great, just like in the second movie, too. We get a nice homage from after Mother kills Dwayne's girl he threw out. We hear Norman in the house saying, "Mother, blood, blood." So, nice callback to the original. Then they have like a football team party or like some sort of party in in Dwayne's room and all around the motel, which is kind of weird because in Psycho 2 he gave Toomey a whole bunch of shit and saying what type of hotel you're running when they're using drugs and stuff like that, renting the rooms out for an hour or two to people to party. Fired him and killed him because of that. Well, Spool killed him, but fired him. Here he's just letting them have a good old time, partying, drinking, like I don't know, his priorities changed. Then we have what do we have? We have Dwayne's whole shenanigans with Norman's mom, the corpse, because Norman goes out to dinner with Maureen, has a nice little romantic dinner here, dances with her. He's very good at it. They must have taught him dance lessons while he was in the sanitarium. I don't know. In sanitarium? In the sanitarium. I don't know. It has nothing to do with anything. But he ends up after that going home and he can't find his mom's corpse. So he's freaking out. He's thinking that she got up and walked away. And then he goes and sees Dwayne, and Dwayne has the corpse. So this dude just like went up into the house and dragged a woman's corpse back to his hotel room. This is where it gets fucking stupid. And then Norman goes in there, and this guy's trying to blackmail Norman because he heard from Tracy, the reporter, when they had a little rendezvous meeting, all about his past. So now Dwayne knows that he was in the sanitarium, nut house for 22 years, that he murdered some people. He wants money. And Norman don't have the money to give him. So he ends up just killing Dwayne. Which, good riddance. Not that great of a character, like I said. Really good lighting in like the hotel rooms, especially when Norman here is drinking a glass of water with Maureen and they're talking and saying how loud the party is. Really cool, like pink colors and stuff from the lamps. I like the lighting here. I mean, the entire reason that this party even exists is just to have more bodies. So, and we get one here. There's a girl who's sitting on the toilet, and then cool scene too. Like she ends up getting her throat slit by Mother Norman, and she like as she falls, she grabs the toilet paper roll and pulls down on it. It's shot very well. Cool. There's not bad death scenes in this. I mean, there's only like 2, 3, but they're good. Same with every other one in this series so far. So Maureen and Norman start making out, and then he immediately freaks out, you know, with all the sexual issues and everything that he's had in his life. He just freaks out. He ends up leaving because while they're at dinner, they were drinking some wine. He even says that his mom never allowed liquor in the house. Now, this makes me wonder. It doesn't make me want to go back and watch all 5 seasons, but it makes me wonder if they paid any attention to that. And if Norma, in the series, Bates Motel, drinks at any point and has liquor in the house. I seem to remember her getting drunk like a few times. So let me know if you guys have seen Bates Motel like recently. And I mean, I know that's such a small thing to remember, but who knows? And then the sheriff, who's just, like I said, just so happy to just keep giving Norman chance after chance and keep believing that this guy is sane. And they end up going to the house, conducting a whole search, and they find nothing. Then Maureen, after the fact, really would have been helpful beforehand, which the sheriff does tell her. She lies and says that she was with Norman all night when the girl went missing. So sheriff says, all right, well, get out of here, Tracy, the reporter. Like, I don't want to hear you causing any more trouble here. We searched the whole house, no problem. And she's even, like, egging on the sheriff to keep on searching. Like, she's saying, check the swamp. Like, that's where he put his victims the last time, and he wants nothing to do with this. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong yet, Norman. I mean, he did, but the cops don't know that. That's a great shot when the sheriff's car is leaving and you just get the long pan out shot of Norman on the Bates Motel, like the porch. That's a great shot right there. So the reporter, Tracy, ends up going to visit this old man in a retirement home who used to own the diner that Norman worked at and Mrs. Spool worked at, Norman's real mother. And he ends up telling Tracy that Mrs. Spool was in a nut house too, and that she murdered somebody, and he thinks it was her husband. He's fucking old, so he don't remember details, but thinks that she killed her husband. So maybe it is his real mother. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think they ever retcon that, unless it's in Bates Motel and they retcon in that. But I'm pretty sure that it's his real mother. So she was just as fucking Looney Tunes as he is. Why would you hide a goddamn body in your icebox right in front of your hotel office when you got people staying in a hotel and they're going to need fucking ice? Like, I don't know. That's dumb too. So Maureen is killed and Norman finds the body afterwards and screams out, "Mother!" Because he still don't know that. I mean, he's insane, so I guess it makes sense. And then Tracy, the reporter, shows up with a crowbar to the motel, and she's going to try to save the day. Yeah, man, the lighting in this movie is great. Like, I didn't remember it being this good. Very good lighting throughout. And then we have Tracy walking around the house, and no Norman in sight, no mother in sight. Very tense scene. Like, they do a great job with the tension here. So then Tracy finds Maureen's dead body on the couch that Norman put there with a candle she's holding. I don't know. And then Mother appears. And what a great shot and lines in Mother's voice we get from Norman to Tracy. And then she's like fucking walking up the stairs, and great shots too of Norman as Mother. Like, you can't even see his face. It's all blacked out. You just see the wig. Looks so good. And then I was wrong. She's not the real mother because she just gives it away here. Like, during her research, she found out Spool wasn't his real mother. And she's pleading for her life, and Norman ends up snapping into sanity in some way and starts stabbing the shit out of his fake mother's corpse. I love Norman's last line here when the sheriff, and he admits, he brings him down, they're arresting him, and he says, like, come on, Norman, he's like, I believed in you, it made me look like a fool, it's like, now they're going to lock you up forever. And then Norman just gives this great line, man, of him just saying, well, then I'll be free, like, I'll finally be free. Great line. Then we have him in the back of the police car rubbing a hallucination of, I'm guessing, his mom's severed hand. And we get the demented mother look from Norman, and it just freeze frames on that. Credits. So good. Like I said, for our directorial debut from Anthony Perkins, while directing himself as the lead role here, is very, very impressive. The cinematography is great. The score, nah, I mean, I didn't even notice it actually on this watch, and I usually always pay attention to scores. But it's just the characters. The characters don't do anything for me for the most part. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of, but there's some decent pacing issues throughout because of it. Time spent with characters I don't give a shit about, and just retreating on old plot points and plot storylines and everything like that from the last movie. Besides that, it's still a solid, very good movie. And a very good third entry. So, Psycho 3, and next movie, tomorrow's my sister's birthday, so I'll be plowed. And nothing's coming out tomorrow. So, Ringu Spiral, either tomorrow night or the next day. Because it's been a while. Finally, time to get back into Japanese shit in August. Take care, guys.